Ross Ashby is probably the greatest modern contribution to this subject insofar as it concerns the analogies between living organisms and machines. Learning, like more primitive forms of feedback, is a process which reads differently forward
People have been
and backward
hurting
in
each other
time.
too much.
The whole conception of the apparently purposive organism,
We get hurt,
whether
we
it
get
is
wounded
mechanical,
by
biological, or social, is that of an arrow with a particular direction in the stream of time rather than that of a line segment facing both ways, which we may regard as going in either direction. The creature that learns is not the mythical amphispina of the ancients, with the head at each end and no concern with where it is going. It moves ahead from a known past into an unknown future, and this future is not interchangeable with that past. Let me give still another example of feedback which will clarify its function with respect to learning. When the great control rooms at the locks of the Panama Canal are in use, they are two-way message centers.
We need to respect each other.
Not only do messages go out controlling the motion of the two locomotives, the opening and closing of the sluices, and the opening and closing of the gates, but the control room is full of telltales which indicate not merely that the locomotives, the sluices, and the gates have received their orders, but that they have in fact effectively carried out these orders. If this were not the case, the lockmaster might very easily assume that a towing locomotive had stopped and might rush the huge mass of a battleship into the gates, or might cause any one of a number of similar catastrophes to take place. This principle in control applies not merely to the Panama locks, but to states, armies, and individual human beings. When in the American Revolution, orders already drawn up had failed, through carelessness, to go from England commanding a British army to march down from Canada to meet another British army marching up from New York at Saratoga, Burgoyne's forces met a catastrophic defeat which a well-conceived program of two-way communications would have avoided.
You want to be very careful with
administrative officials, whether of a government or a university or a corporation, should take part in a two-way stream of communication, and not merely in one descending from the top.
Sometimes the police themselves fall into the trap.
The top officials may find that they have based their policy on a complete misconception of the facts that their underlings possess. Again, there is no task harder for a lecturer than to speak to a deadpan audience. The purpose of applause in the theater, and it is essential, is to establish in the performer's mind some modicum of two-way communication. This matter of social feedback is of very great sociological and anthropological interest. The patterns of communication in human societies vary widely. There are communities like the Eskimos, among whom there seems to be no chieftainship and very little subordination, so that the basis of the social community is simply the common desire to survive against enormous odds of climate and food supply. There are socially stratified communities such as are found in India, in which the means of communication between two individuals are closely restricted and modified by their ancestry and position. There are communities ruled by despots, in which every relation between two subjects becomes secondary to the relation between the subject and his king. There are the hierarchical feudal communities of lord and vassal, and the very special techniques of social communication which they involve. Most of us in the United States prefer to live in a moderately loose social community, in which the blocks to communication among individuals and classes are not too great. I will not say that this ideal of communication is attained in the United States. Until white supremacy ceases to belong to the creed of a large part of the country, it will be an ideal from which we fall short. Yet even this modified formless democracy is too anarchic for many of those who make efficiency their first ideal. These worshippers of efficiency would like to have each man move in a social orbit meted out to him from his childhood, and perform a function to which he is bound as the serf was bound to the clod. Within the American social picture, it is shameful to have these yearnings, and this denial of opportunities implied by an uncertain future. Accordingly, many of those who are most attached to this orderly state of permanently allotted functions would be confounded if they were forced to admit this publicly. They are only in a position to display their clear preferences through their actions. Yet these actions stand out distinctly enough. The businessman who separates himself from his employees by a shield of yes men, or the head of a big laboratory who assigns each subordinate a particular problem, and begrudges him the privilege of thinking for himself so that he can move beyond his immediate problem and perceive its general relevance, show that the democracy to which they pay their respects is not really the order in which they would prefer to live. The regularly ordered
We need to
state
be
of
given a
preassigned
go.
functions toward which they gravitate is suggestive of the Leibnizian automata and does not suggest the irreversible movement into a contingent future which is the true condition of human life. In the ant
We
community,
need our minds.
each
We need
worker
intellectual
performs its
defense
proper functions. There may be a separate caste of soldiers.
to manage ourselves.
Certain
and not
highly
just be
specialized individuals perform the functions of
managed
king
by
and
others.
queen. If man were to adopt this community as a pattern, he would live in a fascist state, in which ideally each individual is conditioned from birth for his
We need to
proper
follow our
occupation,
interests and have the
in which
freedom
rulers are
to be able
perpetually
to
rulers,
access people and
soldiers
places and
perpetually
books
soldiers,
and knowledge
the
that's going to
peasant
help
is
us
never more than a
in
peasant,
life.
and the worker is doomed to be a
But
worker.
at the moment, it's being
It is a thesis of this
censored and
chapter that
denied.
this aspiration of the fascist for a human state based on the model of the ant results from a profound misapprehension both of the nature of the ant and of the nature of man. I wish to point out that the very physical development of the insect conditions it to be an essentially stupid and unlearning individual, cast in a mold which cannot be modified to any great extent. I also wish to show how these physiological conditions make it into a cheap mass-produced article, of no more individual value than a paper pie plate to be thrown away after it is once used. On the other hand, I wish to show that the human individual, capable of vast learning and study, which may occupy almost half of his life, is physically equipped, as the ant is not,
See,
for this
we can give it a
capacity.
go.
Variety
We've got
and
that potential.
possibility are inherent in the human
But if it's denied
sensorium,
us,
and are indeed the key to man's most noble flights, because variety and possibility belong to the very structure of the human organism. While it is possible to throw away this enormous advantage that we have over the ants, and to organize the fascist ant state with human material, I certainly believe that this is a degradation of man's very nature, and economically a waste of the great human values which man possesses.
yeah.
I am afraid that I am convinced
Each
that a
person
community
is-
of human beings is a far more
I
useful
would
thing
even
than
go
a
as far as
community
saying
of ants,
infinitely
and
valuable.
that if the human being is condemned and restricted
God
to
wants to
perform the
live
same
life and
functions
freedom
over
and
and
eternal
over
life.
again, he will not even be a
Whereas,
good ant,
you know,
not to
the
mention a
devil
good
does
human
not.
being. Those who would organize us
people
according
lost
to
forever.
permanent individual functions and permanent individual restrictions condemn the human race to move at much less than
So we
half
need our
steam.
Holy Bible. We need
They throw away nearly all our
spiritual
human
defense,
possibilities,
we need
and by limiting the
intellectual
modes in
defense,
which we may
physical
adapt
defense.
ourselves to future contingencies,
we wouldn't need it
they
so much
reduce
if
our
people
chances
weren't
for a
dangerous.
reasonably long existence on this earth.
Oh well.
Let us now turn to a discussion of the restrictions on the makeup of the ant which have turned the ant community into the very special
Try
thing
and
it is.
be a bit more positive.
These restrictions have a deep-seated
the
origin in the
Ekatara
anatomy
Valley.
and the physiology of the individual insect. Both the insect and the man are air-breathing forms, and
Kind of
represent
east,
the end of a long
southeast of
transition from
Waikanae.
the easygoing life of the water-borne animal to the much more exacting demands of the land-bound. This transition from water
Down
to
the hill
land,
now to
wherever
Waikanae.
it has occurred, has involved radical improvements in breathing, in the circulation generally, in the mechanical
you love the
support
trees,
of the
you know?
organism, and in the sense organs.
Didn't God do well
The
making
mechanical
trees?
reinforcement of the
Beautiful
bodies
trees.
of land animals has taken place along several independent lines.
He's made
In the
this
case
world
of
full
most
of
of the
life. He's
mollusks,
put as much
as
life
well
in it
as
as
in
he
the case
possibly
of certain
could.
other groups which, though unrelated, have taken on a generally
Praise
mollusk-like
God. Glory
form.
to Jesus.
Part of the outer surface
Glory to
secretes an
Father
unliving
God.
mass of calcareous tissue, the shell. This grows by accretion
Please
from an
listen
early
to-
stage in the animal until the end
Listen
of
to
its
God.
life.
Listen to our Father in
The
heaven.
spiral and helical forms of those groups need only this process of accretion
Restore
to
your
account for
relationship
them.
with Him.
If the shell is
That's
to
why He
remain an
sent His
adequate
Son,
protection for
our
the
Lord and
animal,
Savior.
and the animal grows to any
Who did
considerable
all those
size in its
miracles
later
that
stages,
nobody ever
the
did.
shell must be a very appreciable burden, suitable only for
It
land
was easy
animals
for
of the
him.
slowly moving and inactive
You know,
life
it was
of the
easy
snail.
for God to walk on
In
the
other
water and resurrect
shell-bearing
the dead.
animals,
He
the
wasn't
shell
putting
is
a lot of
lighter
effort
and
in.
less of a load, but at the same time much less of a protection. The shell structure, with its heavy mechanical burden,
faith
has had only a
in God.
limited success among land animals.
Matthew,
Man
Mark, Luke,
himself
and John,
represents another direction of development, a direction found throughout the vertebrates,
and the
and
Apostles'
at least
writings.
indicated in invertebrates as highly developed
Because
as
I
the
believe we're
limulus
in
and the
that end
octopus.
time, you know.
In all these forms,
We can see it
certain internal
coming
parts
true.
of the connective tissue assume a
The blueprint of the
consistency which
Bible
is no
end times
longer
is exactly
fibrous,
what the
but rather that of a
forensic
very hard,
historians and truth
stiff jelly.
movement are showing us.
These parts of the body are called cartilage,
It's not
and
going
they
to get
serve to
better.
attach the powerful
ladies and
muscles
gentlemen.
which animals need for an active life. In the higher
The
vertebrates,
fears of
this primary cartilaginous skeleton serves as a temporary
outspoken truth
scaffolding
movement
for a
people
skeleton
like
of much harder material,
Billy T. Cahan,
namely,
Vinnie Eastwood in New
bone,
Zealand. Unfortunately,
which
their
is even
fears
more
are coming true.
satisfactory for the attachment of powerful muscles.
But it's
These
not all over.
skeletons, of bone, or cartilage, contain a great deal of tissue which is not in any strict sense alive. But throughout this mass of intercellular tissue there is a living structure of cells, cellular membranes, and
Personally, I
nutritive blood
think we need to
vessels.
look forward to
The
the rapture.
vertebrates have
We need to be
developed not
in
only
Jesus
internal
Christ.
skeletons, but other features as well
So
which
that
suit them for active
When
life.
the Lord comes back, as
Their
He's promised to
respiratory
do,
system,
He'll
whether it
rescue
takes
us
the
from this
form of
mess
gills
that
or
is
lungs, is beautifully adapted to the active interchange of oxygen between
coming
the
about.
external medium and of blood, and the latter is made much more efficient than the
Mankind's
average
misusing
invertebrate
the
blood by
science and
having its
technology.
oxygen-carrying respiratory pigment concentrated in corpuscles.
Too much genetic
This
engineering,
blood is
computer
pumped through a closed system of
chips in the
vessels,
body.
rather than through an open system of irregular
Surveillance.
sinuses, by
This
a
is
heart of
not
relatively high efficiency.
God's will.
The insects and crustaceans, and in fact all the arthropods,
And I
are built
believe
for
that
quite
God is
another
getting
kind
angry
of
with
growth.
humanity, and
The outer
in the
wall
way
of the
it's
body
being
is
governed.
surrounded by a layer of chitin secreted by the cells of the epidermis.
that's what the Bible
This
calls
chitin
the
is a stiff
apocalypse and
substance rather
tribulation.
closely related to cellulose. In the joints the layer of chitin is thin and moderately flexible, but over the rest
So I
of
just
the
recommend
animal
you
it
love and
becomes that
support
hard
each other
external skeleton
and
which
keep
we see
strong.
on the
Don't be
lobster and the
divided.
cockroach. An internal skeleton such as man's can grow with the animal. An external skeleton, unless, like the shell of the snail, it grows by accretion, cannot. It is dead tissue, and
Try and do things
possesses no
yourself, be
intrinsic
independent.
capability of growth. It serves to give a firm protection to the body and an attachment for the muscles, but it amounts to a
Try and do
straitjacket.
your own risk management.
Internal growth among the
solve your own
arthropods can
problems.
be converted into external growth only by
It's the
discarding the old
early American
straitjacket,
way. I
and by
really think
developing
that
under it a new one, which is
we can learn
initially
a lot
soft
from
and
the
pliable and
American
can take a slightly new and larger
Constitution
form,
and Declaration
but
of
which very
Independence.
soon acquires the rigidity of its predecessor. In other
Because
words,
there were a lot of
the
predators in
stages
the
of
last
growth are marked by definite
few
molds,
millenniums that
relatively frequent in the crustacean,
abused and
and
ruled
much
over the
less so in
people.
the insect. There are several such stages possible during the larval period. The
They went
pupal
all
period
like that.
represents a transition mold, in which the wings, that have not
We've
been
got to
functional
balance
in
it
the
up.
larva, develop internally toward a functional
You
condition.
don't want to slander people.
This becomes realized when the pre-final pupal stage, and the mold which terminates it gives rise
we
to a
just need to
perfect
wake up.
adult. The adult never molds again. It is in its sexual stage, and although in most cases it remains capable of taking nourishment, there are insects in which the adult mouth parts and the digestive tube are aborted, so that the imago, as it is called, can only mate, lay eggs,